Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about a very honest conversation, and that is the struggles that I've had with chastity during dating. I've kind of gatekept some of my more personal stories or struggles because I'm a big advocate for healing and working through things before sharing them, especially online. And now that I've been married for about 6 months now, dating is a little bit more in the past, and so I thought it would be nice for me to share with you some of the honest struggles that Craig and I had, particularly myself, with practicing chastity, because at the end of the day, I really hope that sharing my personal situations and story with you guys will encourage you to know that you're not alone. And at the end of the day, I just hope that this video encourages you to know that you can practice chastity and that it is possible even though it's hard. And so I just hope that my story is a source of encouragement for you. Also wanted you guys to know that you should definitely go watch a bunch of the chastity videos. I have a playlist on my channel of all the videos I did back about a year ago now, and that was when I was dating. So those videos, even though I don't share very raw and honest stories, I talk about chastity in more of a overview kind of sense. It's really good to see how I talk about it amidst the struggle that I was dealing with at the time. I think it's really cool to see, even though I was struggling with it, it was something that I'm very passionate about, was then and still am to this day. And even though I'm married, that doesn't mean that chastity is completely behind me. It's definitely still present, and Craig and I still nurture that virtue a lot, but it just looks very, very different. And as you know, chastity is not just abstinence. Chastity is about the mind, heart and body, and I've done a whole video on that very topic, so if you also want to learn a bit more about that, then that video I'll put up here. So I'm really going to be sharing one boundary specifically that you've heard me talk about quite a bit, but this time I'm just going to talk about it in a bit more of an honest and raw kind of way, talking about my personal experience, and that is to do with passionate kissing during dating. I know I talk about it all of the time, but it's one of those things that is just not talked about very much. And although kissing is good and showing affection is good during dating, passionate kissing often leads to, if not yourself being aroused, then often the other person. And quite often that was the case for Craig and I. And I found that when we were in those scenarios of passionate kissing, it was usually when there wasn't many other people around. So making sure you're not alone in a room together or alone in general is a big help, because it's just that added level of temptation. Something that I'm passionate about, and why we decided to make passionate kissing a physical boundary, and we weren't going to do that during dating, was from experience. And I guess it's because maybe you're thinking, oh, it doesn't really matter if you're aroused, because it's not like you want to go all the way or anything. It's not like you're doing anything wrong. But like I said, chastity is about the mind, heart and body. And there's this phrase, I don't know where it comes from exactly. Don't turn the engine on if you're not planning on driving the car, right? And so that's kind of the way that I see the problem of passionate kissing. Because how hard and how sad is it to be able to promise so much and then not deliver on it? And at the end of the day, the feeling of guilt that we had was kind of a good guilt. It shows that our consciences were well formed and that we knew we were doing something that was wrong. And it was just not nice to see Craig being drawn away from God, and vice versa. It was hard for him to see me being drawn away from God, because whenever you put yourself in a situation of sin or a near occasion of sin, it's really hard to choose God in those moments and to choose the right thing to do. So anyway, that's kind of the struggle. And even though we made that a physical boundaries, sometimes we didn't always keep to it. But the way that we kind of got through it and how we dealt with it was really to do with talking to each other as well as going to confession. So I'll start by talking about the kind of conversations we had surrounding that topic and physical boundaries. Basically, after having conversations, especially the first few times that it came up and we had to go to confession, we're like, okay, we need to put something in place to make sure this doesn't happen again. And so we needed to kind of have those conversations when we did decide to kiss, because I still think kissing is okay, but just not passionate kissing. When we did decide to kiss or like hang out or show affection in some way, we needed to make sure that we were communicating with the other person. If we were like feeling like we might be aroused soon, or like that kind of thing, was really important to have that communication. Even though it might be a bit awkward, or maybe it's like it can be really hard in those times to say no. So it is best to really think of what are the situations, like how can I make sure we're not in a room alone together, or like how can we make sure that we don't even end up passionately kissing, what boundaries do we have in place so it's easier to say no before it gets hard. So making sure we talked about that like during the situations, but also afterwards, was really good for us. And because of those conversations, we started to get to know each other's triggers a bit better, and then kind of eliminating situations of a near occasion of sin, so we didn't have to struggle with saying no when it was really hard. And then a really important factor with how we overcame that struggle, or like how we dealt with it during dating, was going to confession. So as soon as we could, basically, we would go to confession, and we both had different priests that we went to. So even though you don't have to share what your priest says during confession to you, sometimes a priest has really good advice. And so for Craig and I, quite often we would share the advice that we got from our different priests. So we would often share the advice that we got during confession with each other, and we found that really helpful because often it came with different perspectives. Sharing a little bit of that advice with things like running to God more often, and like really leaning into the sacraments even more so, even though maybe you'd feel a bit like unworthy, knowing that God loves you and he really wants you to come to him. So often the advice was to pray more and to ask God for that desire to really want the true good of the person you're dating, because at the end of the day, if you have that desire, then it's so much easier. Well, at least for me, I found that the more of a desire I had to lead Craig to become like more of a saintly or holier man, I didn't want to be the person that was drawing him away from God. So that really helped us as well. And some practical advice was, like I always say, try to avoid being alone together. We definitely got told that by priests as well. We even decided to read more books about the topic of chastity to learn from other people's experiences. And we also read a lot more about like theology of the body, which really helped us learn how our desires to be close to one another were good, and rather than falling into the trap of feeling like we're repressing all of those desires, it was really nice to read about theology of the body and read how those desires are good. And I could tell that there was something more, because even when we wanted to just passionately kiss, like we said, that's all we wanted to do, we were always left wanting more. And that wasn't necessarily intimacy, but there was just something like missing. And so reading about theology of the body and like learning more about it, and then me like kind of sharing what I was learning through the YouTube channel, was a really good way for me to really become more and more passionate about this topic and really strive to practice this virtue of chastity more. So I really encourage you, if this is a topic you're interested in, do not leave it at this video. Definitely go read more books, watch more videos on this topic from good Catholic people who have good advice, who are talking from experience, because it is just so worth it. Because when you start to fill your head with this knowledge, and this knowledge about how good God is and why he created us with this desire, why does our heart long for so much more? Why do we feel unfulfilled at times? And so it's just really cool to be able to read and watch and listen to that kind of content. It really helped. And then going back to the topic of confession, when Craig and I first started dating, I was going to confession about like once a month, which was pretty good. At the time, I didn't feel like I needed to go too much more. And then it turned more into once a fortnight, which is what Craig was doing at the time. And I thought that was really good, and it just helped me keep more in check with my like daily examens, and just like kind of keeping up and really drawing more on the sacraments. So that I thought that was really good. But then when it came to engagement, we started to find it really hard to practice chastity. As you can imagine, we had kind of promised each other that we would get married, but we were like planning the wedding day and all of the marriage prep that's involved in the lead up to the wedding day and things like that. So it makes it really hard, and we did really struggle at that time. So sometimes I was going to confession once a week, sometimes even more than once a week, and that can be really hard. And I did feel quite embarrassed and I felt quite unworthy, but it was really nice to have Craig encouraging me that, hey, it's okay, just go back to confession. It's best you just go, don't put it off. And so it was so good that we could both be, when one of us was like, oh, I just feel so bad, like I don't want to go to confession again, and then for the other person to be like, hey, it's okay, you should go. And so if you're one of those people, I want to be that person for you and say, it's okay if you went yesterday and you feel like you really need to go again. Go to confession again and again and again. You cannot go too much. Your parish priest or the priest that you're going to confession to will be able to give you the right direction you need. And maybe if there's like a sin, like sometimes I wasn't sure if we did go too far with the kiss, or like was this really a sin? I don't really know. It was best I just bring it up, and usually the priest could kind of confirm whether it is or it isn't. And maybe like during that time I had a spiritual director, and that was really helpful too. So if you're a person who is struggling and maybe you are going to confession once a week or more, find someone that you can get spiritual direction from, or someone who can really help you. Maybe if it is like something more than just chastity between you and your boyfriend, maybe it's like an addiction to pornography or masturbation, or I don't know, so many other different things, drugs, drinking, whatever it is that you're struggling with, and you feel like you're going to confession lots and lots and lots, and you feel like you need a bit more. Consider finding like an anonymous group or something like this. That's not personally a struggle that I have, but I do think that even though spiritual direction and confession and the sacraments is good, there's also other groups out there in different ways that you can deal with those things to make sure that you're putting actual actions in place so that you don't have to continue to struggle with that. Even though chastity takes hard work, it is so worth it. And I can tell you now that I'm in marriage, there's just so much fruits that I can see. Like, I'm so glad that we waited till marriage, and there's such a joy as well, like when we were dating and we were able to, say no before the no was going to be too hard to say. Like, there was so much freedom in that, like being able to have, better conversations, being able to show each other how we love them in like different creative ways. Like, there's just so much freedom in practicing the virtue of chastity in its wholeness. And so just know that marriage doesn't fix those desires, and so it is so important, even if you've only just started dating and you're struggling with it, you're not even sure if you're going to marry this person and you're struggling with it. It's just something to know that there's so much freedom in that moment. You don't even need to look super far into the future to know that it's so important, and there's just so much joy that comes with self-control and pursuing God. How good is it to be able to say that you love someone for them, and that it's not just about the feeling you get when you kiss them. At the end of the day, I just hope that this video was encouraging to you, and if you want to hear a few more, maybe like personal struggles or stories that I've had from my dating years, then I would be keen to share them. Just let me know in the comments that you like this kind of raw, honest content. And thank you again for watching. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you very much. Just know that you are not alone in this fight, and God bless. See ya.